have given a name to my pain. The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill the Bat of Gotham. You don't really think you'll win, do you? I'm Batman.
Hello and welcome to episode 156 of the Batman on Film podcast. BOF is the sponsor as well as a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network. Check out all the shows over at batmanpodcastnetwork.com and follow our Twitter at BatPodNetwork. If you're listening to us on iTunes, if you take the time to rate and review the show, we will read your review on the air. Batman on Film is also now on Patreon if you like what we do here at BOF, whether it's the podcasts, those silly little vlogs, or the website itself, and you want to help support us, if you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/BatmanOnFilm and sign up. I am the host of the BOF podcast, Ryan Haas, and on tonight's show, we are going to have a roundtable discussion focusing on one thing and one thing only. Joker, directed by Todd Phillips and starring Joaquin Phoenix. And on this roundtable of roundtables, we have with us Ryan Lauer. How are you, Ryan Lauer?
Hey, I'm doing good, minus the fact that my power just went out and I delayed us talking. Go me.
Go you. Well, at least you're...
I instantly thought of that. I thought of when this was web before when my internet went out and I couldn't talk Batman Ninja Turtles. Another one that I was extremely excited about, except that one there was no recovery.
Well, maybe there's a correlation between your excitement and bad things happening to prevent you recording.
I just need to stop getting excited for these.
Yeah, just be like,
I need to start dreading it. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
There we go. It's all Chewbacca all night here on the BOF After Dark.
Done.
We also have Chris Clow. Man, I'm excited that Chris Clow's here. How are you doing, Chris?
Oh, I'm doing okay, man. Thanks for the invitation. I always love coming back to BOF.
Yeah. And
Ryan, you don't need to feel bad because all your delay did was let Ryan Haas and I talk a little Nintendo beforehand, so it's all cool.
Yeah. So you're welcome, actually.
Thanks, Lauer. I appreciate it. I mean, we love our Nintendo. We love our Nintendo here on the BOF podcast, and I got to go to the Nintendo store in New York when I went to New York Comic Con. That was
They had a
good
great
time.
Metroid shirt that I bought when I was there.
Oh, they didn't have any. They didn't have any Metroids. They had one Metroid. They had a Metroid hat. That's all they had.
That's a bummer.
But I did buy like 5 T-shirts. So, because when else am I ever going to get to go back there? So, as you heard in the background, there was a Snicker, and that Snicker belongs to somebody that has requested to be on this Joker review show for months. Yes,
only because I requested it. I see how it is.
No, it's not only because but you know that bumped you. It was like priority queue, like a fast pass, like if you go to Disney.
Ryan, remember. I was one of the first people that jumped on this movie from the very, very start. And I was one of the first people to say, yes, this is a good thing, people. This is a great thing.
When everybody else was like,
Paul, excuse me,
Joker.
aren't you a big Marvel fan? What are you talking about Joker for? You're supposed to be about Marvel.
I am about Marvel, but I'm about the genres in general, homie.
You can't cross the street, okay?
Man, Lauer, stop getting excited, Lauer. Something's about to crash into your house.
Oh, I thought that was the DC police coming for Paul.
They're like, oh, we're going to get you.
You're about to hear some sirens coming on. So
we don't have Marvel Zombies on a DC podcast. We can't deal with this. No,
but that's the voice of Paul Hermann.
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
Yes, thank you for having me on. I did request to be on this because when it first got announced, I think I asked you first thing. I'm like, I got to be on this show because I knew this. I knew, again, not because I'm trying to brag about it. I just knew that this movie was going to be special in a lot of different ways, and I did not predict it was the political side of this whatsoever. But I will say I did anticipate something of a special film that people would cling to in certain ways, and it would be a game changer in the genre, which I think it's evident that I think it's happening. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, from the second this thing was announced, fandom was kind of on edge. Either mostly outright derision, or why are they doing this, or that's a horrible idea, or why does the Joker need an origin movie? And I mean, you can even listen to it on this show. We're pretty okay about it. And I think I ended up on the stance of we'll just have to wait and see, and we'll just see this thing. But it's been interesting that it's been kind of this uneasy, we'll see how it turns out thing until the build-up for this movie. And like you said, Paul, it got really interesting, to say the least. But kind of want to get real quick thoughts of where you guys saw it and what your initial reactions were when you saw it. I'll go first. I'll go really fast. I mean, I'm as you all may know, I'm still tired and exhausted from New York Comic Con. So as you heard on the last show, me and Pete kind of did a breakdown of all the stuff we did there, and one of the things that wasn't at the con but was part of that whole thing was of course the BOF watch party for Joker, and we got to see it on 34th Street, the AMC IMAX there, and it was just a great experience getting to meet Eric and Pete in person, and getting to meet other listeners and other people that we met on Twitter, and other folks that came to the watch party, and get to watch it as a group. And I was tense through the whole movie. There were some parts where I'm just, I'm sitting right next to Pete, and certain things happen in the movie, and we're just looking, and we just look at each other are we watching the same movie? Did you see what I saw? What's going to happen next? So it was great. It was crazy. It was a great, crazy experience. But that was just kind of me. And you can also see on my Twitter that there was a pretty big line of police cars and armed cops in front of the theater that whole time too. So that was interesting. How about anybody else go next?
Breeze.
No,
it sounded like a breeze as far as Comic-Con and the movie theater and everything.
No,
I don't know why you're tired.
No.
No,
it was a lot.
All right,
it was busy. It was busy time. Well, how'd you see it, Lauer?
Well, I saw it I didn't even know that they were doing 4:00 screenings, early screenings anymore. I thought
on Thursdays
7:00 was I thought 7:00 was the earliest. And then when I looked it up and I saw that they had 4:00, I was like, yes, please. So I saw it at 4:00. I saw it at an IMAX screening. And yeah, I loved it.
There you go. That's simple little
discussion.
Yeah, that's just your
initial thoughts. Is I wasn't as unnerved. I didn't think it was. I don't know. I just shut up. I loved it. Then we'll talk once we get into spoilers on other specifics. So there you go.
Cool. What about you, Chris?
How do I put this? Leading up to the release of the movie, I found myself feeling weirdly averse to all of the chatter that was surrounding it. It happens so often nowadays that a movie, particularly a genre movie, comes out and people talk about it to death, usually with these searing hot takes that you could only get from the internet. So I was feeling a little bit bitter about the prospect of going to see it, but it's also a movie descended from a character who is diametrically opposed to someone I've often said is my favorite character in all of fiction.
And you know what didn't help too was that the movie premiered over a month ago, so that's probably contributed. Didn't hurt, or didn't help.
It certainly didn't help. Because that's what kicked up the initial fervor. You're absolutely right in pointing that out. So when I reasoned, and my wife wasn't feeling great, so I would be going alone to it on Thursday night, or it was Friday night. I didn't even go to Thursday night. First time for any Batman Descended movie, I didn't go to the first possible screening. So Friday night, I was going to go by myself, and was just like, well, maybe I should wait. No, I should just get this over with. That was my attitude going into it. And when I went I just went to a basic 2D screening at my local theater because it was easy. It was a little less expensive, and I was just going to absorb it because I wanted to just sit with it. And I got a little side-eyed because, lone white guy in a black jacket walking into the movie theater after the media kicked up such a storm about it, understandably threw a couple of side-eyes in my direction, but that was fine. I was just extra polite to people that were around me. And sat down, watched the movie, and thankfully one of the things that happened while I was watching the movie was that I was able to leave all that baggage in the lobby that I was feeling about it, and I could just go on the journey. And ultimately, what I came away with was that it was a good movie. I liked what they did with the movie. I thought it was an interesting character study and something that ended up being tonally more truthful, at least to the end destination for the character, than I was expecting. And that was a pleasant surprise. It might have taken a little bit of a scenic route on the way to that familiar destination, but it got there. And at the end of the day, I still prefer Joker stories where he is a foil to Batman as he was initially designed to be. But, and I didn't necessarily think that the movie was a hugely standout, great masterpiece, even though it was very well built and very well photographed and very well performed. But, good, and potentially even fascinating. Great, that I'm not sure about.
That's concise, and that's a good place to leave it. What about you, Paul?
I loved it. I think that The Joker is going to be the first of many films that will hopefully come from DC that really try to think outside the box and think outside their own central continuity that they've established with, obviously, the DCEU, Harley Quinn and the Suicide Squad and the Birds of Prey and all that jazz. But that being said, I think that The Joker represents something that people want, which is different stories, different types of stories, different interpretations of these characters that we know and love to see get beat up by Batman or Superman or Spider-Man or whatever, to get a different take on the mythos. And we get that in the comic books a lot of times with the Elseworlds, or even just different not characterizations. That's not really what I want to say, but different interpretations. You if you will, like
one shot graphic novels, maybe,
or just having a writer might have a different kind of spin on the character on the ongoing series than others, even though it's the same character and it's the same. They just kind of write them better or a little bit differently, and they do more creative things with them. Whatever. That's what I'm kind of anticipating that DC is opening the door for is welcoming directors and writers to come in and say, hey, if you have an idea that's really good and it's not going to cost us $1 zillion, you know what? We're open to that. And I think this movie does a great job of showing you what a writer and an artist with a vision can do. Now, obviously we get that with the Nolan trilogy, and all you Batman fans will tell me, well, the Nolan trilogy is that, and you're right. But that's very much aligned to just a straight ahead Batman story, whereas this is a little more obviously even grittier than the Nolan stuff, which is the Nolan stuff was gritty for the time and took it seriously and gave Gotham a sense of wonderment and a sense of like there is like a darkness to it, whereas it's not cartoonish like the Tim Burton films. And I think that was great, and that was much needed in those comics. But what I would say though with the Joker, and what it did a great job of, was giving us a Gotham that is truly, truly eating itself apart. And you get that all over the place. And that to me, and you have the Joker with it. And to me, you see that all together, and you see the Joker birthed from that. And it's fascinating because that is also a parallel to a lot of, I think, what people would say was a problem with today's right now. And it's interesting. And it's definitely plays on serious political things that are going on right now. But at the same time, it's still a Joker movie. It's still about the Joker. And this, Todd Phillips' interpretation of what if he was in charge of the Joker, this would be his interpretation of that character and of that, what he would want the origin to be. So I love that we got all that. I love that it all is connected to this, one character, and you see it from a different point of view that we normally wouldn't get. We'd get, again, they look at 89, Jack Nicholson's in the movie a lot, almost as much as Batman.
Mm-hmm. It's almost the Joker's movie.
It almost is. But this is truly the Joker's movie where you get to really get deeper into it. What I will say, do I think it's perfect? Not quite, but I'd say it's close in my opinion. And we can get into the nitpicks and stuff, whatnot later, but I think the Joker is a game changer in so many different ways. I think it showed DC that you don't need to throw hundreds of millions of dollars into a budget to make a good movie. These characters carry a lot of weight themselves, and you can do a lot with them if you do the right thing and you tell the right story. And you don't have to do big budget stories. You can do these small budget character pieces. And yeah, we're going to talk obviously a lot about this, but I have a lot to say. But yeah, I think Joker is borderline a masterpiece. I've only seen it once, but it's not something I want to go out and watch on a theater right now unless I get the 35 millimeter screening, which I don't think I have in my town in Seattle. I looked for it. I don't think it's there. I'll have to look a little closer, but I want to see it again. I can't wait to watch this thing in 4K and see everything even grimier than what I already had or what I already saw in the theater. So yeah, I think this movie is great, and I can't wait to get into it.
Speaking of which, just real fast, piggybacking off of that, apparently, at least from what I can see in a couple of like Blu-ray tracking websites, they're going to fast track this. The release date that I saw, the release date that I saw for physical media was December 17th.
No way.
Holy crap.
No way.
Maybe for digital, maybe you think? Or actual?
Maybe. I mean, it's weird. Like Blu-ray.com, they're normally on top of that stuff. And they listed it as December 17th along with a whole other host of releases from other studios. Whether or not they're actually going to meet that date, I don't know. But
it'd be like the last week you could actually release something before the holidays.
You're right. No, Chris is right, because Venom, I remember this distinctly. I got Venom for Christmas last Christmas on 4K. And
it came out in October.
So yeah, so he's right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And December 17th is my birthday.
Oh, somebody knew.
Thanks, WB.
Wow.
That'll be
crazy.
Interesting. I kind of wonder if they'll maybe milk this a little bit and have like, I don't know if they could do an extended
30 seconds of
material to the theatrical version.
They have more than 30 seconds of cut scenes. We know that.
Well, either way, they're going to print money by putting it out at Christmas time.
I mean what's crazy is sense. Yeah, what's crazy is the amount of behind the scenes stuff we've been getting in the press tour of this. Like Todd Phillips has talked a lot about the movie, and there's been a lot of YouTube interviews and stuff where he's done like scene breakdowns and talked about what the intentions behind certain scenes were that I honestly was not expecting to see for this kind of film. So I'm very curious to see what the Blu-ray for this looks like. But yeah, I guess let's just kind of dig into the movie. I really liked what Paul was saying.
Oh, thank you.
About everything. But like the story backbone of this film, I think is something that is definitely striking the biggest chord, especially if you look at, some of the articles and think pieces that are being written. They're all talking about, was it a good idea to make this movie? And does it work? And this and that. And I'm not as interested in that kind of commentary as much as just talking about the film itself. But I think one of the big overall things I think the movie tries to put forward is like, does society make the villain, or was he always inherently evil?
But remember,
I think the movie makes you think about that.
Well, and again, going back to what I said earlier, Gotham, not just society. I mean, and granted, like going back to Batman, and I think it's important to emphasize the comic book aspect of this, is that Todd Phillips is saying he's talking a larger political, I think a little more political, as far as Gotham represents the world and that we live in today, right? But I'm going to bring it back to I'm going to bring it back to Batman and to what the roots of this whole story is, which is Gotham. Gotham is why Batman is birthed. Gotham is why the Joker is there, and that is the emphasis of the film, is that Gotham is just a crap hole. And I know that's like pretty typical for the Batman mythos and whatnot, but I think this movie does a great job of bringing Gotham into a sense of, it's really, again, like I said before, it's eating itself alive.
And they open the movie and run off the bat.
Yes.
They hit you with that, with like the radio commentary and stuff.
And that's the thing, is that we go and think about what drove Batman and the death of his parents and whatnot, which again, we'll get that in a second. But again, Gotham is the reason Batman exists, just in general. Whatever interpretation you go by, that's why he exists. He exists because his parents were killed in Gotham, because Gotham was rotting, again, and that's the emphasis of why everything is going to hell for Arthur in this movie. It's that he is in a society where Gotham is just creating these awful things. And that's awesome. And that's not awesome, but it's awesome that they're playing off of that, because again, that is what Batman and the mythos and the comic books are all based off, is having this real dirty city that needs to be cleaned up. And you see that before Batman's even a twinkle in the Batman's eye, if you will, that it's already gone to crap, and it's got a long ways before Batman ever even shows up. So seeing that, I think, is such an important aspect of getting any kind of Joker or Batman affiliated film right. The fact he got Gotham and he got exactly what they needed from that was so crucial. I'm curious for, again, you guys are the bigger Batman fans than I am, even though I love Batman and everything. You guys know my love for Batman is true, but I'm curious for hardcore Batman fans, I'm assuming nailing Gotham was an important aspect of this movie. Would you guys agree to that?
Oh yeah. I mean, now this Gotham is pretty great, and it fits the tone of the film, to a T, and it definitely has the kind of feeling of, this is the kind of city that this could happen in, or that it could produce. That's so correct. Like in the Dark Knight trilogy, it was more about, corruption and the mob and that kind of stuff and organized crime. But in this movie, it's more like a societal unrest between, the rich and the poor and all that kind of stuff. And you get some of that in The Dark Knight Rises, a lot of that actually, but you really feel it in this movie in a way that I don't think we have in any of the other ones. It works a lot for the story, but I wouldn't say it's my ideal Gotham, because I can't really see any Gothic like gargoyles or any Batman perching spots or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's not exactly like ripped from the Arkham games or anything like that, but it still totally felt like Gotham to me.
For me, it's just like with variations of characters through Batman's history, of whatever story that they're telling, just as long as the setting fits. I think for this story, this Gotham needed to be this way, so therefore I thought it was most effective, and it worked the best. You take this Gotham and I don't know, you name Batman 89. I don't think that it works in that one. It doesn't work in Returns. Like it maybe it worked in Batman and Robin had they gone that route. I don't know. But I think for this particular story, like they knew what kind of Gotham that they needed for their story. So, and I think that it was perfect.
The vision of Gotham in the movie is terrific. The idea that often gets played with in any adaptation that takes place in Gotham is that it is just an oppressive environment in virtually every way imaginable. And that's one of the things that I'm happy about with the movie, in the sense that there is all of this unrest. First of all, the visual design, it perfectly evokes those late 70s, early 80s Scorsese kinds of movies, as it very much intends and wants to do. But thematically, all the unrest that's taking place in Gotham is almost irrelevant to Arthur's journey. And the reason that I say that is because by the time he starts to become more comfortable with the creature that he will ultimately become, he takes advantage of it, but doesn't actually care about it. And that is perfectly encapsulated by what happens at the end of the movie, because all of these people who paint their faces and become clowns because they're trying to express their dissatisfaction with the disparity between the working class and the upper class, they are ascribing meaning to meaninglessness. Because why did Arthur really kill those 3 people on the subway? He did it because they were mistreating him. He wasn't out to make a statement, but it's all of the people who are so whipped up into their own frenzy. It's kind of an interesting comment on how people perceive the movie at large. They're whipped up in so much of their own frenzy that they ascribe meaning to Arthur's actions. And that's how he becomes the quote-unquote face of a movement. And the environment of Gotham absolutely contributes to that idea. But in a way, that's what makes the civil unrest that we see in the city kind of irrelevant when looking specifically at Arthur's journey. But it is that irrelevance that gives it relevance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of like played in the background. And throughout the movie, I kind of wondered how it would, be incorporated later on in the movie. And it almost kind of comes out of left field in the same way that it feels like it comes out of left field for Arthur. By the time he gets to the end of the movie, he's like, oh man, look at all these people. Or like partway through the movie where he's, looking at a cop car and they've got a detained person in a Joker mask in it. He's starting to see these things, but I don't know if he's really made the connection until later on in the movie, like where the second subway scene where the cops are confronting them and he's almost full on Joker at that point.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I find generally effective about the exploration of the character in it, because by that point, even though we've taken that scenic route, like I alluded to before, the irreverence and lack of empathy, I suppose, for the people around him, like they are props in just getting him to the next place that he wants to go to. And that's something that seems, at least to me as a Batman fan, very familiar about the Joker. Because that is how he sees people, and he's in pursuit really only of his own kind of self-gratification. There are iterations of the Joker that always try to make a larger point, and yeah, I might prefer those kinds of versions of the Joker, particularly in stories like The Dark Knight. But the aimless Joker, who is not only aimless but unpredictable, was very, very visible in this movie. And that is an element that feels truthful.
Well, I think that what I saw and what I thought was interesting was the different interpretations or different ideas of where his kind of craziness comes from. Again, we had different iterations where he was, again, the Alan Moore Killing Joke, where he's this mild-mannered comedian, then he goes in the vault of acid and he turns into a different person and transforms him into a... And again, like, I don't want to take anything away from that because that's fine, but you also have the 89 version, which is, again, involves the chemicals, but also involves the fact that Jack Napier was a lunatic already, and then the chemicals just made him more unbalanced, and there's all these different things that would cause the character to go through this transformation. But you see the transformation of the Joker as a gradual thing, which again we're not really used to. Again, and this is coming from someone who hasn't read every single Joker story, but I've obviously seen and read a number of comics and movies about the Joker and origins. I'm assuming that's a little more different take on that idea. I haven't read the Azzarello comic yet. I do have it now. Thank you, Comixology, for sales. But maybe that's different. I'm not sure that it's even an origin.
It's not really an origin
story.
Yeah,
exactly. So again, and we have the Heath Ledgers, which is there's no origin. And I know a lot of people like that idea. I kind of like that idea too, but I also love me some origin stories too, right? So here's the thing. What I love what they did was you get different takes on, okay, why does he laugh? Why does the Joker just have this big cackle? Well, they have an explanation for that. And it's not like a stupid, we have to explain everything. I thought it was a great thing that what the laugh kind of stems from his mental illness, that it kind of makes him transform into the person that we essentially would know eventually, right? He has this nervous kind of tick laughter that's in there. And then as he gets more uneasy, and we don't see it in the movie, but you would assume that as he becomes more unhinged, that laugh comes out more and more as a way of just not just coping, but actually like loving what he's doing. So,
and then don't you get like his only actual genuine laugh at the end of the film or something like that?
Well, here I think that actually understanding the mechanism of how that works actually contributes to the theme of the overall movie.
Mm-hmm.
A rare instance where that's the case. So that particular affliction is called the pseudobulbar effect, and it's also known as emotional incontinence, and it's classified as an emotional disturbance. And so it's perceived like uncontrollable fits of either laughter or crying. And the movie takes a little bit more of a specific approach by just describing it to laughing. Really, from my perspective, that is the brilliant stroke of this movie, and where I give it all of the credit in the world as an innovation to apply to the long-standing version of the Joker. Because thematically, it's introduced as a disorder, and he is trying to control it, and he almost has like a shame over exhibiting it. But then as time goes on and he starts to lean more into expressing himself through violence, and leans more into the idea of his life is not a tragedy, it's a comedy, he almost adopts that disorder as,
exactly.
Oh, well, this is just, I'm not laughing because it's unnatural. I'm laughing because it's funny. Mm-hmm. So every single time that he exhibits that laughter, he reasons at the end, when he is the fully formed Joker, that it's funny. And it's causing him to laugh just because it's funny. And that is something that I will absolutely give the movie full credit for, as it's sort of like what Batman Begins did in explaining every component of Batman's suit.
Yes.
Yeah. By giving the Joker what appears to be a medical reason for these kinds of inappropriate bouts of laughter, and even really his sadistic sense of humor and personality. That's a really good idea. And
yes.
It deserves credit for that.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Thank you, Chris. You articulated it even better than I ever could, because that's exactly, because normally when writers outside of comics try to do that, it's bad. Let's be real. I mean, and the Nolan trilogy is a great example of why and how someone can make those things work, like the bat ears. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not sure if that was from a different movie or whatever, or a different comic already established, but it felt like they really made the suit make practical sense. And now, again, you have the Joker. It makes practical sense of where the laugh comes from, where, again, you brought up the fact that, is he laughing or crying? There's that scene where he's doing both, right? He's laughing and he's crying. And I feel like it was a Subway where it feels like he's crying and he's laughing. Like it was a brilliant take on the character.
You could tell he's sad while he's laughing.
It's almost like it was painful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And he can't,
trying to hold it back.
Yeah. And brilliant move. And again, you go back to the fact that he kills those 3 Wall Street people in self-defense, basically, but he still kills them.
Or does he? That's we'll get into this. But 95% of the movie is from Arthur's perspective. And there's that plot device that we get where we're not sure, are we seeing a delusion? Are we seeing Arthur's side of the story? the way it appears to us in the film is that it's self-defense, but is that really what happened? There's a lot of things in the movie that kind of make you wonder about.
Well, it
the truth
keeps
of the
giving
moments.
him agency, which I think is important, because there comes a point where, I mean, I certainly didn't question that, especially by the time he is more Joker than Arthur, he's made up his mind concerning who he is and what he sees as something for him to be accountable to. And he reasons through his impaired reasoning that there is nothing for him to be accountable to. And that is kind of a fundamental critique that I have of the movie. But overall, as far as like a character purpose, it's effective because he could have chosen not to kill, but he didn't, because he didn't want to choose not to kill. Like, he is still in full control of whether or not he is going to express himself through violence, but it's easier and funnier for him to express himself that way.
Well, I think when he had the chance, he took out the three people. And again, assuming that's what actually went down, it's still crazy because he followed that one guy all the way out and basically made him watch him walk.
He didn't have to do that.
No, he didn't. And again, you have that side of him start to come out. And again, when I talk about the gradual transformation of the Joker, that's exactly what I'm talking about, because it was that scene afterwards where he's looking in the mirror and he starts to, and again, I love at first, like, I thought it was going to be an immediate transformation. Like, okay, we're going to start seeing that, the literal translation right here. But
that's
wasn't.
what we're so used to in the comic lore. There's like, Killing Joke is like your perfect example, right? You get a lot of tension, a lot of backstory, and then it all bubbles up, and then that one bad day happens, that one event happens where he falls in the acid, and then his whole life is ruined or whatever. But we get that tension throughout the whole movie, and it was really interesting seeing that gradual, descent into becoming the full-on Joker.
But it also does funnel into his final decision, because that is one of the few direct lines that ends up being adapted in this movie.
I had a bad day.
And it's at that point where he fully makes the turn, and particularly by the time his former co-workers come to see him in his apartment, he is full on with the idea of, this is who I am, this is how I will express myself, and I'm going to make everybody pay, and it's going to be hilarious.
So I think, should we start to kind of try to go through, like, linear through the movie? Like, particular scenes, like evolution or something? Or how should we go about talking?
How about this? I mean, let's start at the beginning with perspectives on when we meet him in the dressing room.
Yeah, so the way the movie opens, we talked about that a little bit when Paul was talking about Gotham and the unrest, and that's how it opens with the radio stuff. But another thing to piggyback off of what Chris was saying about giving this movie credit for new innovations is that really early on, when we were seeing things being shot or discussed about for this movie, is the fact that they really lean into the clown angle for Joker. And historically, he's a guy that looks like a clown, and he just does jokes, does things that he thinks are funny. But really, they really hit it hard with he's an actual clown, and he's working as a like an advertising clown in an advertising agency, and he paints his face, he dresses up like a clown, and it kind of all it's one of those things where it's like, I've got this affliction, I laugh all the time, maybe this is one of those things that I'm always, I'm just kind of naturally, this is one of the only things I can do with myself or with my life. And it ties into the whole I feel like my mom says I need to bring joy and laughter to the world and stuff, and it really paints a picture of a sad individual. But I just thought that was a really interesting way to open the film and start it out with the fact that he's already a clown.
I think that the clown aspect was, it feels like low hanging fruit, and I didn't really need necessarily the clown angle, but it makes sense if you're going to adapt what you identify with and what comes natural to you, which for whatever reason it's natural for him to kind of go towards the clown idea as a job and whatever. But again, going back to just the fact he wants to do comedy and make people laugh, there is that sense, there's that sixth sedation of what he thinks is funny and what he thinks is right. Again, I know this movie is influenced heavily on Scorsese films like Taxi Driver and things like that. And obviously I've never seen The King of Comedy, but I've heard it's very influenced by that. But the idea that there's that scene in Taxi Driver where he takes his girlfriend to the porno movie and doesn't really understand that, like, oh, that's what you do, because he's so out of touch with reality and what is appropriate and what isn't. And that's kind of the same thing with him, obviously, to an extent, where he's laughing at all these jokes, but doesn't know like what makes them funny. He's just doing it because everyone else is. And what he thinks is funny, you get you go back to the idea that, and we listen to the Mark Hamill Joker, and we listen to the whatever Joker you want. The Joker makes these really weird, sadistic jokes that are dark and they're kind of funny, but they're also dark and gross, and they're not funny, but he thinks they're hilarious. Well, you get to see the birth of that a little bit with these jokes, because he starts, even though they're kind of dark and they're kind of and sad, you get to see the birthplace of this idea of where what he thinks is funny is not necessarily the same thing everyone else is even close to thinks is funny. And, and even at the end of the movie, we see that where he kind of does that too, right? Like he's laughing. He wants to prove everyone wrong, but he also is laughing about it too, and to an extent. So there's just a lot of, I just love the idea that you see the birth, and early in the film, they're going what Lauer wants to do, but like go linear here. But if you go through the movie as he makes people laugh, that's what gives him the connection to people, right? That's his only human characteristic that he can really identify with people, is by making them laugh, and trying to anyway, even though those kids beat him up at the beginning, even though, whatever, he's still, he's making those kids laugh in the hospital. He identifies, and he goes sees people in the comedy club. He identifies with making people laugh. And I think, again, that human element is the only thing that gives him a connection to people. Otherwise, he doesn't have that. And because he doesn't have that connection, he clings to that. And therefore, that's the only thing that gives him purpose. And when that gets exploited to him, and he realizes that, and again, amongst the other things that are going on, it's, again, you see the downfall of the idea of what the message of the story is, which is obviously, we treat people, we get what we get, we treat people, we get what we get back. We get back what we deserve, essentially, is what I think Todd Phillips is essentially saying with the Joker. And with all that being said, I just think that I do think the human element of laughter, and that was what he clings to. And it's interesting because the Joker obviously is all about laughing and all about jokes and these darkness. If you go past this movie into the comic books or whatever, and again, you see the birthplace of that in a very dark and sadistic way, but it makes sense, right? So it doesn't, I don't think it ever goes outside its depths or outside the lines of saying, oh, you're giving me too much information. I think it makes total sense of what you could see the Joker twisting in his mind.
Woo! Woo, Lordy. You want to keep going, Paul?
No, I'm talking too much, man. I'm talking too much. I'm shutting up.
You got this. You got this.
No, Lauer, you go, man.
Oh, hell. Well, like listening to you and Chris elegantly explain, it's kind of like, I don't know that I have anything different or anything to say that's better.
I ain't elegant. I ain't elegant, man. Chris is way
elegant,
smarter than me. I ain't elegant, man.
Well, I was just trying to be nice. So what Chris said was elegant.
There you go. Exactly. Well, I appreciate that.
You said things.
Fair enough.
Jeez.
That's fair enough.
No.
No, it is. It's true.
It is not.
Anyway, go ahead.
So I think a major point of like contention with the movie that's brought up is the fact of like that we're supposed to empathize with this guy and feel sorry for this guy. Right. And I don't know that I necessarily ever really felt sorry for him at any point in the movie. There was some part, it's when he was back at work the day after getting jumped by the kids, and I forget the man's name, the one that ultimately gives him the gun, but he says something about, hey, Artie, I heard you got jumped yesterday or something, and he just delivers in such a way of like, they're just kids. But it's just almost really something about his delivery on that is where I kind of felt bad for him, because he just seemed so, I don't want to, kind of pathetic, but I think that's almost a little harsh to say that it's pathetic, but something like about him there I did. But then there's just, if you teeter close to feeling sorry for him, they really delivered something that made you question even feeling sorry for him. And then
I think the perfect example of that is when the one slight moment of almost levity in the film is when he's like dancing at the children's hospital, and he's actually doing a great job. Like the kids are like solely with it, and he's like being a clown to the like, really sick kids, and he's like singing, he's dancing, they're all with it, and he's doing a great job. And then that gun falls out of his jacket, and the entire theater was like, oh.
See, the reaction in mine was laughter.
What?
Wow.
Well,
man, Chicago is messed up, dude.
No, man, I think that moment is funny, and it's funny in the correct way, because it's funny and horrifying at the same time.
Uncomfortable laughter.
Yeah, I mean, because the actual incident of that taking place, especially the way that Phoenix plays it, is pretty damn funny. But then you start to think about it, and you're like, holy hell, he brought a loaded handgun into a children's hospital. He doesn't know how to use that thing properly. It could have very easily gone off when he dropped it. It's when you start thinking about it more that it becomes the more disturbing. And but I mean, there were a couple of moments in the movie that honestly, it's the sign of a well-written Joker, when your first instinct and your reactive perspective is laughter, but then you kind of hate yourself a little bit for doing it.
Well, the other scene is I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, Chris, is the scene where the two friends come to his apartment, and he's already, halfway or more there, and he's got the green hair, and it's after Zazie Beetz he's killed her, right? I guess.
Well, so that's another
insinuated. Whoa.
This is why I wanted to go linear, gentlemen.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you jumped the shark here, man. Come on.
Because I'm going to forget things I wanted to say. And
I'm with
Ryan. Write it down, Lauer. Anyway,
curses.
The two friends come to visit him, right? One of whom is a little person, right? Mm-hmm. And we were in I don't know, at the watch party. We had Blade Runner Reno D from Twitter. He came from Canada to this watch party.
All right.
And it was great to meet him. He sat next to me, and I sat in between him and Pete watching the movie. But he said, like, do you think that having the little person in the movie could have been a reference to a really obscure reference to Gagsworthy?
Yes.
From the comics.
I thought the same thing.
And you said you don't read enough Joker comics.
It's
you know who Gagsworthy is?
Well, he's the little Joker, right?
Yes.
So he's I remember that only because I read the Birds of Prey, but the Gotham City Sirens comic that DeNiro wrote, which is great, by the way, and that was great. But yeah, I remember him. I had no idea who he was until he showed up and went, oh, what the heck is this guy? So when I saw him in the Joker, or I saw that little person in the Joker movie, I thought the same thing. I'm like, because they're friends and he was nice to him, and he just saw him murder the guy with a freaking scissors or whatever.
Yeah, like, so as soon as they come visit him and he shuts the door and the top gets locked, I think the whole theater was like, oh, something's gonna happen here, like, but we don't know. I think that was one of probably the top maybe one or two tensest moments in the entire film. And after he kills the bigger guy,
Randall.
After he kills Randall, you're just like, oh no, and the little person, I forget his name. He's in the corner like, oh no, oh no, what'd you do? And then as soon as he gets to the lock, that is what it was crazy. Is like the whole theater was like, I think there was a mixture at that point of like uncomfortable laughter and like, oh no, and I think that is like very, very Joker to me, as in terms of like you don't know how to react to something. And I think that was by design. And then he comes back. One of the most Joker things he does in the whole film is when he comes back around and he does that little like that little jump scare thing.
I know. Oh,
that was insane to me.
Oh my. Okay, so we just gonna jump into that scene now.
Do it, Lauer. I'm sorry. I messed up your.
It's okay. It's because I'm just gonna forget things. I know I'm gonna forget things. But that scene,
we all will.
Like. So I saw it twice, and I'll just tell you guys, the second time, nothing is taken away because you've already seen it. If anything, you're almost focused even more trying to figure out and like tie this to that and whatnot to support whatever theories you might have. And that freaking scene, like that and maybe the end on Murray's show, like contend of the most Joker of the entire movie. Mm-hmm. And there's so many freaking elements in that I think it's a different, like on the surface, yes, different things happening, but at its core is the character of the Joker. So his leaning and just being his full on, his makeup of all just one color without the additional smile and the eyebrows and stuff was just creepy. But then the way that he's just like, kind of like he's got his arms on each side of the wall, kind of leaning over, and he just lets off this slow, creepy laugh. His joke with doing the chain lock, and then just the snapping into killing the one guy, and then lets the other one go is so Joker because you just don't know. I always said, I think Haas, you told me the other day that like Deanie said, you don't know if he's going to shake your hand or
give you $100.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was that, but on film. Yeah,
that's spot on. And then telling him, because it was definitely the most tense, because I just felt like he put the scissors in his pocket when he went to answer the door. So you're like, okay, those are coming into use.
I didn't notice that. Wow.
And then he locks the door, and you're like, okay, well, and so you're just waiting for something to happen. So something did happen. But then I think it got more tense as he's just sitting there, and it cuts to him, the blood on his face, and just his look, like his eyes was just like, that's when like the creep level, the tension really got cranked to an 11 and told the guy he could go. And then, yeah, like you just mentioned, also the Joker. And then that the guy is going to need help to unlock the door. And then what's he do? Kisses him on the head and lets him go. I'm like, oh my God, it's the damn Joker.
And to add to that whole scene is Joaquin Phoenix kind of helped with help from like costume designers. He helped design all of the faces that they made for the Joker.
That scene, I think it was his idea too. Of kind
yes,
of
like, it was experimenting. Yeah. It was him experimenting with his own. Like he always wanted to apply the makeup himself to give it its own unique take. And that was one of the ones he was experimenting with. And that was what gave him the idea to have an early incarnation of, as he's putting on the face paint, he's not quite yet that level, the Joker, but that's like right after he kills that guy as as he becomes the Joker. That is the next level of transformation. Again, going back to my transformation thing that we said before, we had him as a clown when he's staring in the mirror of himself with that beautiful score, which we cannot talk about enough.
God.
We got to talk about that score.
As soon as I got out of
that's another one of the scenes. Yeah.
That score is gorgeous. It's maybe one of the best whatever comic book scores of all time, and it's gorgeous. It's beautiful, and I had no idea. So people online were talking about it, that they wrote the music and the music was recorded before they filmed the movie, so they could listen to it.
So the big thing about that scene, I just saw this today, is that as written, that scene was not the way it was filmed. So like on the page, like he runs. Scene? No. The scene bathroom. Where the score is playing, he's in the bathroom after he kills the 3 guys on the subway. Apparently, the original scene in the script is that he frantically runs to that bathroom and he's trying to like wash all the makeup off his face and tries to
in the toilet.
And he's trying to.
And he was going to hide the gun.
And he's trying to hide the gun. But they had the piece of music already, that like as a test or a temp thing, and they just said, yeah, and they were like, this scene doesn't feel exactly right. Yeah, they like the scene doesn't feel exactly right, and so they talked it over, and then they came up with what is in the movie on the day, and it's amazing. The whole way that he dances with the scene, and it's not just out of nowhere. He's the whole. The film leads up to it. It really builds up to it because he's already trying to figure out, like, trying to mimic other, things that he sees in life. Like he really wants to be on the Murray Franklin show, and he's trying to mimic that dance and everything, and try to figure out what he wants to be and how he wants to perform and be a comedian and be a performer that people will enjoy and stuff like that, and bring laughter to people. And the way that music just kind of swells, and he starts dancing and stuff, and doesn't even care that he's killed the people, doesn't even care that he's not washing the makeup off, or doesn't even care that he's not hiding the gun. Like, that's the Joker.
Exactly. Right? That's key. Yeah. And that's the first time that I think the Joker is birthed, but it's it's held at bay because he's still holding on to a little bit of humanity. That
it's
he
like
has.
It's proto Joker, right? It's like in the Santa Claus when Tim Allen tries to deliver all the presents, but he's still regular Tim Allen, and he's not like full on Santa Claus yet.
Exactly.
I've been waiting the whole show to bring that analogy.
You wrote that down, and you're like,
it's like the only show note that I had,
and your leg was like bumping up and down, like, I'm gonna do it. When am I gonna drop this? I'm gonna drop this right now. But
it is. It's a proto version.
It's a proto version.
I loved that scene. One of my favorite scenes of the movie, and then to hear that story behind it, I was just like, that's incredible. But I took it more as like, so the scene leading up to it it's kind of like he felt like reactive in shooting the 2 guys in the subway, and then just like something snapped of getting the last guy, and then there was almost this quick realization of what he'd done. Hence the scenes of he's running, he's panicking, slam the door shut in the bathroom. And I took it as a sense of like, this is the first time that he's kind of like, that he's stepped into like full on Joker shoes. Cause as it focuses first on his feet of like how different he just ends up moving in elegance and just his feet smoothly moving. And I feel like it's him slipping into being comfortable with what he just did.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you start in the film. That's when you start seeing that difference between Arthur and Joker, like in terms of his body language and the way he talks and the way he interacts with people.
He's got his shit together after he kills people, and it's like, okay, that's not okay.
well, you compare how he conducts himself
afterwards
in the bathroom with his first turn in front of the psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most direct and stark difference between the two, because the camera goes down to his legs bobbing up and down. He's rarely making eye contact. He's kind of shuffled and hunched over because he's trying to fit into that society. When that no longer becomes a concern and he moves into expressing himself in that way, that's when he's most comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sign of a guy that I certainly didn't. What you guys were talking about, the sympathy earlier, and I think it's not only normal but probably appropriate to be or feel sympathetic toward Arthur at the beginning of the movie. But the scene with the killings on the subway and then quickly followed by the bathroom, that's really where the true dividing line happens, because that's when he takes that biggest step toward who he will ultimately become, because there's no real, like, outside of maybe he should have kicked them off of him, that's one thing, but killing all 3 of them was not justified, and I don't think that the movie tries to justify it.
No.
He does it, and he likes that he did it, and that's the path that it sets him on. And he ceases to be a sympathetic character, at least for me, as soon as he starts taking people's lives.
I think he's sympathetic to an extent because you see where he comes from. Again,
no.
Hold on, let me finish. Because again, he's trying to fit in, like you said, Chris, and you see the fact that you understand at least like he's trying to be in the society. But the thing is, his actions in the end do not justify anything that he does, and that's the point, like you said, and that's why when he kills those people on the subway, it's wrong because they're hurting him. He shoots them. He could have left it alone, but he didn't. He just kept shooting, and then we go back to the last guy he killed. He watched him crawl out, and then watched him try to go upstairs, and then he killed him to give him
I'm about to drive Paul crazy. There was an episode of Star Trek, the original series, called...
Why are you bringing Star Trek up to this?
A Taste of Armageddon. And in the episode, the Enterprise came down to this planet. They've had a hard time making or establishing relations with the indigenous people there. And they realize that, it's because they keep saying that they're at war. How can they be at war? Every building is still standing. It doesn't look like there's overflowing hospitals. Everyone looks like they have a really high quality of life. And ultimately, what you realize is that a neighboring planet and this planet have been having digital warfare. So all of the infrastructure is still there. They launched almost like a video game, simulated attacks where casualties are recorded. And in order to maintain a semblance of peace without like going into outright warfare, people have to willingly march into disintegration machines and kill themselves. And they're explaining this to Kirk and they're explaining this to Spock. And Spock even says, that's a rather logical way to go about it by preserving the infrastructure. And the guy who leads the society looks at him and says, I'm glad you agree. And Spock looks at him, raises that characteristic eyebrow, and he says, I do not agree. I understand. The movie, I don't think, does anything close to trying to justify or make you sympathetic.
I would agree to that.
You said there's still a degree of sympathy.
Well, hold on.
No. Hey, I let you talk. There is a big difference between sympathy and understanding. By understanding everything that he goes through, you see what leads him to that point.
But I don't
think that's the same thing at all.
But Chris, you got to understand too that you can understand it, and understand too comes a little bit of like sadness. And understanding that sometimes that sympathy is understanding the fact that they cannot help what they're doing also in the things that they dealt with.
He could have helped it though.
Wait. He could have helped his mom, like upbringing him and overbearingness and lying to him.
No,
yeah,
you're right. He could have helped it by staying on the train and not killing the third person. But he did it because he wanted to.
I'm not saying that either. But that's what I'm saying. There's certain things in his background that is sympathetic. Like I'm not saying,
hey, no. And I told you before. Feeling sympathy for him in the beginning, especially when you realize the totality of events that led him into that point, is one thing.
That's what I'm saying.
But by the time he reaches that point and in that moment, particularly after he starts doing the dance in front of the bathroom mirror,
I agree.
You understand, but I don't think you sympathize.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You
didn't sound like it.
No.
Didn't sound like it.
No. What I'm saying, Chris. Didn't sound like it. I know to you it didn't sound like it, and that's why I'm trying to explain myself. But I'm just saying that there is up until that point, there is sadness in his life, and you can understand and sympathize the fact that that sucks. Like,
by the way, if you want more of this, feel free to download the Comic Binge podcast.
Yes, but
we have all sorts of fun.
And again, I go back to the transformation. That's what I'm trying to say, is that you get the full on transformation, because there is a sympathy up to a point and you're like, ooh. And that's the thing where I think people were misjudging the movie before they came in and watched it. And there's all this white incel BS around it. I'm trying to sympathize with blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's not at all what it's doing. It's showing you the downfall of someone.
You brought up the fervor, like the political kind of fervor that gets stirred up by this, but that's really external to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think about any of that stuff.
But you can interpret.
Granted, I studied politics for 4.5 years. This movie is very much not political. Like, all of that stuff is very much what I was alluding to at the top of the show, where these things happen and people are ascribing meaning to it. It's kind of a weird meta-commentary on the reaction to the movie, in a way.
Oh, shoot. I know y'all are dying to hear how that discussion resolves, but I think that's a good place to put a pin in it for now. On the next episode of the BOF podcast, we will pick this discussion back up, get deep into the weeds on whether Joker should have a sequel or not, and get into some final thoughts on the film. And no, Rick Shue, we don't rank anything. Since I'm going to cut this into 2 shows, I'll do really quick plugs for the guys. Ryan Lauer is on Twitter at Lauer_Ryan, Lauer spelled lower. Chris is on Twitter at Chris Clow, and Paul is on Twitter at Hermann22 with 2 N's, aka P-Thug. And that's a good bunch of guys, know what I mean? So for now, that wraps up today's episode. For Paul, Chris, and Ryan, I'm Ryan. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Hey now! You've been listening to the Batman on Film podcast, a proud member and the sponsor of the Batman Podcast Network, batmanpodcastnetwork.com. You can listen to the BOF podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, TuneIn, and wherever good podcasts like this one can be found. Want to advertise on the BOF podcast? Go to advertisecast.com/the Batman on Film Con podcast. Follow Jet on Twitter at Batman on Film and on BOF's Facebook fan page at facebook.com/jet.batmanonfilm. Email Jet via jet@batman-on-film.com. I'm announcer Rachel. Thanks for listening.